enter your access code or meeting number followed by the pound sign. Please enter your attendee ID number followed by the pound sign. If you do not know your attendee number, just press pound to continue. Welcome to WebEx. You will now be placed into the conference.
Participating today. So please take a moment to respond to these poll questions as I will be closing them shortly. If you look at the right side of your screen, you should see several boxes labeled Participants, Chat, Q&A, and Polling. The Participants section includes a list of panelists that will be speaking today. Please use the chat function to report any technical difficulties that you encounter during the webinar, and we will do our best to resolve them. Below the chat box is the Q&A box. Please use the Q&A function to submit your questions in real time. I encourage you not to wait until the Q&A section of the webinar to submit your questions. Our goal today is to get you as much information as possible on this issue. We'll be circulating all the submitted questions that aren't answered during this webinar and then posting them to the Choice Neighborhoods Technical Assistance website. That way we can make sure you all get the information that you need. Finally, I'd like to encourage you to complete the participant satisfaction survey that will be popping up on your screen at the end of this webinar. We really aim to be responsive and provide support to grantees doing this work. These surveys are a valuable tool in helping us to better understand your technical assistance needs and the best way to get you the resources and information that you need. So please complete the survey. I just put up the agenda for today's webinar to give you an idea of the themes we will be discussing. First, Choice Neighborhoods Director Mindy Turboff and Elsa Nash from the Department of Education will give some opening remarks to frame the conversation on how the arts play a unique role in neighborhood revitalization efforts. Then Dan Lurie and Jason Schutback from the National Endowment for the Arts will speak about some of the different ways that NEA supports revitalization efforts. Next, Maria Jackson from the Kresge Foundation and National Council on the Arts will speak about the concept of culture, cultural self-determination, and cultural participation and the way that arts furthers this goal. They will hear from Bert Krenka, the Artistic Director of AS220, a nonprofit arts organization based in Providence, Rhode Island, so we can get an idea of how organizations on the ground are implementing this work. After Bert's presentation, we will hold a Q&A session and address as many participant questions as time will allow. Finally, Dan will conclude with some final summary and remarks on the issue. Before I pass the floor over to Mindy, I just want to share the poll results. Looks like about 35% of the participants are Choice Neighborhoods Planning grantees, and most of the participants are unfamiliar with the NEA Our Town program. So with that, I will go ahead and pass the floor over to Mindy Turboff.
Good afternoon. Can everyone hear me, I hope? I'm on mute. Okay, good. Okay. Okay. Anyway, good afternoon. I want to welcome everyone to the, my group is laughing with me. Sorry, you can all laugh too. I would like to welcome everyone to our, I believe it's our third choice webinar, and we will be continuing to have webinars throughout the coming year. And I would like to very much thank my fellow panelists for helping put this together and our team over here at Choice. We are proud to have a broad spectrum of Choice representatives in the audience as well, or participants, and in particular, I want to welcome our Promise partners. We felt it was really important, since we work on many of the same issues around large-scale neighborhood revitalization, that you should be able to participate and benefit from the experience that we're pulling together here. As many of you know, the Choice Neighborhoods is a part of a larger Obama administration effort to bring together place-based activities through the Neighborhood Revitalization Initiative, and now into the future with Promise Zones. As the Neighborhood Revitalization Initiative is a partnership with the Department of HUD, the Department of Education, Department of Justice, Treasury, I have taken a personal interest in dragging the NEA into this partnership, which Dan will share with you. And so rather than talking about too much about the Choice Neighborhood Program, because most of you know about it, I just want to let you know that, the idea is that it's comprehensive neighborhood strategies that include housing, people, and neighborhoods. And we had 47 planning grantees. We've graduated a few, but not all of them. We have 9 new ones we just announced, and we have 9 implementation grants, and we will be announcing 3 to 4 in the late spring for our new round. But as to why we have the NEA as part of our partnership on this call is that the first NRI meeting I ever went to, Dan was there. And because I have a personal passion in the arts as a way to revitalize neighborhoods, we started a little cabal. And Dan then spoke at our planning conference in June, or at one of our conferences or forums. And we had quite a bit of interest in continuing the topic of the arts. So we are continuing on this effort. Dan got me invited to an activity about placemaking, and where I met Maria, and we are all trying to bring arts more into the neighborhood revitalization arena. And my own story about this, why I do this, is one, I am a part-time artist, but two, and most important, is I am a huge fan of the Works Progress Administration, otherwise known as the WPA, and which built a lot of public housing before there was a public housing authority system. And if you look at the slides, the current slides, you will see what arts were when arts were incorporated into public housing as part of a strategy. Whether or not you like the design of the housing, which we may now consider obsolete and not perfect, you will see that, like in the top one, this is Lathrop Homes in Chicago, and it is a series of beautiful 1930s-style sculptures with fountains running through them for kids to play in. There are these kinds of designs in a variety of older public housing in Chicago, in Baltimore, in Cleveland, Pittsburgh, in many places. The design, and so they were made for open spaces, but to give a sense of place to a community, a sense of gathering, and make people identify with a community. The lower one was 1939, as you can see, is a magnificent mural that's on a development in Cleveland that's been redeveloped, but the mural's been saved, and that is honoring workers in the steel industry and the industrial history of Cleveland, but also then the mural is actually a map of the site, and it's a mosaic tile mural. So I just want to say that this isn't the first time people have done this. It's just something that we've forgotten about how to do. And as to why we think this is a good place for choice, in choice we think that our neighborhood, our strategy is about people, neighborhood, and housing. And as you can see on the slides, we think that it's a great way to identify and cultivate emerging and existing talent. In New Orleans, for example, the grantee, the implementation grantee, is working with a local artist who designed a lot of the early graphics and is now working for the design firm. But he set the logo and the identity of the whole redevelopment in Iberville. We all know that the arts are a great tool for community engagement. You can bring people together around arts, neighborhoods, etc. And I think it's a great way to do youth programming, and I'm hoping a lot of you will consider that. It's hard to get kids involved, but when there's arts, it usually works a lot better. In terms of neighborhood, this idea of placemaking, which is really a new buzzword, but it's something that's been going on for decades, as you can see by the pictures on the right. It's a great way to celebrate a neighborhood's culture, its history, through murals, other kinds of arts, and really change the perspective of an image of the neighborhood, or to honor it, to have others see that this neighborhood has a strong identity. And then, of course, for housing, a number of strong neighborhood revitalization efforts, whether they're choice or not, use artist housing, often subsidized, because artists don't make very much money, except for a handful, as live workspaces, and again, in the design elements, such as the murals, and things that will, again, tie back to placemaking, but directly in the housing, exterior, perhaps interior. So I want to give you a very quick, oops, I got to flip my slide, sorry, description, and I think Jody, can add to this or as we finish. The development, the Rockford, just briefly, two of our choice grantees, one in Rockford, and we'll get to the other one, as part of their planning, have done a great deal of work around arts, and they're using their transformation plan to change the image of the neighborhood. And I think very interestingly for an incubator for the arts that will attract new people to doing artwork in the neighborhood, living there, and creating art. But I think the most important thing, which is really, really an interesting pilot, is to train folks in not existing artists or people to become artists and craftspeople to learn how to sell their art and work on Etsy. And so they have a whole entrepreneurship program around Etsy, which if you would like more information on it, we can get it to you through Jody at the Rockford Housing Authority, or we will figure out some kind of collaboration on that. And then I'll let you, so it's, these are some of the activities. I'm running over my 5 minutes, I'm sure. Implementing the Creative Assets and Treasures Hunt and Development Project, which is trying to access more additional funding from the Rockford Arts Council, and working with teachers, creating business mentoring program, and developing a micro-lending program. Again, about creating arts as an economic self-sufficiency activity. As to our friends in Opelika, the Opelika CDC, which is also a choice grantee, has a historic neighborhood, and this is not really part of their choice grant, but they're doing extraordinary work around the arts and have gotten National Endowment for the Arts funding, as well as, I believe, some other foundation support to recreate the Alibaba corridor. Now, don't laugh at the name. It turns out they have the largest collection of Moorish buildings in the United States in Opelika. And they are designing really a placemaking strategy where they will be putting along a 2.2-mile corridor landscaping and sculptures and parks and things that really honor the history of the community and make it have a sense of place. Additionally, they too are working on developing a microfinance enterprise, helping local residents build up their capacity to earn additional funds or create art in a way that supports them.
Thank you, Mindy.
That's it.
I just want to make sure that we give Elson a chance to talk about.
Fire away. I want to introduce Elson, my partner in crime over at the Department of Education. And you can take it back, right?
Yep, I've already taken it back. Elson? Having some technical difficulties. Elson? Okay, we're going to go ahead and move forward to Dan Lurie and Jason Shutback at NEA. Dan?
Thanks, James. Fast forward here. My name is Dan Lurie. I'm Director of Strategic Partnerships at the National Endowment for the Arts. I'm going to give folks on the call a broad context for the conversation today as it relates to arts and neighborhood revitalization. And I also have a very particular objective, which is trying to create, per my title, more strategic partnerships among the three grant programs we're going to discuss today: the Choice, Promise, and NEA's Art Town program. There obviously are some kind of policy conversations we can have today around the intersection among these various strands of work that are taking place on the ground. But I also want to make sure going forward that to the extent there's interest among you grantees, especially the Promise and Choice folks on the call, that NEA is an able partner to you to think about linkages to our town grantees, but also going forward, potentially applying to our program. My colleague Jason Schupak, who will take the baton from me in a few minutes, will walk you through the nuts and bolts of that program, including application deadlines. So the broad arena into which NEA's Art Town funds is called creative placemaking. And Mindy touched on the kind of placemaking interest that has always been there among people doing work in neighborhood revitalization. What Jason has created with Our Town is a unique investment tool that allows for partnerships between municipal offices, the mayor's office, and an arts nonprofit to really take on catalytic change in revitalization work in communities. And he's going to talk you through some examples of that. But the way I view this and the way we at NEA view this is very much arts as a system. So similar to the fact that housing is a system, education is a system, transportation, land use, art is also a system. It is not simply, obviously, just an aesthetic effort. It also is not just individual artists operating in a vacuum. It is something that takes place across many different time and landscape horizons, and it's a powerful system that can really transform communities, especially when linked strategically to those other investment tools and systems. And so Our Town is the federal government's only dedicated place-based program to this work. However, it, like all the place-based work, is a platform. It is a relatively small investment pool, especially compared to Choice and Promise, but it provides catalytic funding that can really serve as a platform for other funds to attach to it and drive change at the local level. Creative placemaking, this is two researchers who kind of come up with a commonly used definition. In creative placemaking, partners from public, private, nonprofit, and community sectors strategically shape the physical, social character of a neighborhood, town, city, or region around the arts and design activities. So the key here is that this is art's at the core. This is not art as a add-on at the end of a project. This is not making sure that a community spends its required amount on arts. It is something that allows for artists and art to be central to the investment strategy and the revitalization strategy. And what we are most interested in NEA is trying to foster that kind of work. We understand that this is a relatively new enterprise, so one of my hopes for this call is to introduce folks to this conversation and get them to see the potential here and ask questions, learn more, and then NEA can be a helpful thought leader to help provide expertise and potentially through our grant programs help fund some of this work on the ground in your So in addition to the kind of revitalization in the kind of hard context, there also is collective efficacy work that we know we have good evidence takes place by engaging artists and art stakeholders in revitalization work. And this is really in the kind of social capital world where we have strong evidence that my friend and colleague Maria Jackson will speak to later on how art and artists can play a transformative role in building the kind of the people and social capital that is required to really transform a neighborhood from running chronic distress to a more resilient path. So I'm going to now pass the baton to my colleague Jason Schupak, who directs the Art Town program, and he's going to walk you through that program and examples of what this stuff looks like on the ground.
Well, hi, everybody. I'm just absolutely thrilled to be on the phone with you all today. It's very, very exciting to be talking about our work in the context of everybody else's work. Just again, when we're thinking about creative placemaking, our goal at the agency is to get away from talking about this work as, that little arts project over there in our community. It's really about, here's our community, here's what we want to see it be, here are the 150 tools we have that we need to work on, the complex 3D picture of building our community. And creative placemaking is really, what are those 15 or 20 tools that the arts can provide to actually building a better community. So these are small but really catalytic investments. Our town itself is a relatively new grant program here at the agency. We've given out about 190 grants, everywhere from an Eskimo village up there in the Bering Strait, and Alaska, all the way down to Tampa, Florida, and Miami. The key thing about our town is that it is a forced partnership between the local government and an arts organization. You have to have those two partners to apply to the program, and it has to be the elected leader of the local government that actually chooses the project that will come into the agency. We only outside of those two typical partners, what's really shocked us and thrilled us here at the agency is that an average Our Town grant, even in some of these small communities, we funded a town of only 12 people, and pretty incredible. We're seeing up to 15 partners, 15 organizations is the average number of partners that we're seeing on projects in our town. So it's everybody. It's libraries, it's armies, business associations, schools, construction firms, banks. Obviously, housing authorities are on a lot of these. So everybody's sort of all in on the arts as an development strategy. So what can you actually apply for? This is the nitty-gritty you've been waiting for. Well, three big buckets of things that you can apply for. One is arts engagement activities. This includes any kind of innovative programming, festivals and performances, public art. Obviously, the murals that Mindy was talking about are quite a common project. Obviously, and we know that not everybody's quite ready yet to do actual programming, so we do like to support cultural planning. That can include just the first step in cultural planning, which might be, doing asset mapping, figuring out who's there in your community and in your neighborhood you should actually be working with. We do like to support creative entrepreneurs. And then also we can fund design. So design of artist-led workspace, arts incubators, any of that kind of work, design of cultural facilities, design of public spaces and how they might be used by for the arts, and also any kind of design community engagement activities. So really a broad scope of what you can apply for. Here's the application schedule. The guidelines were posted in September. They are due January 13th. I'll say that again. They are due by midnight Eastern Time, January 13th. We then go through all of our application processing, and you can actually start a project in September 1st, 2014. So you're looking at no activities could happen in these grants before September 1st of next year. I want to show you really quickly a few quick examples. I wanted to show another Opelika project that we funded. So Opelika has a lot going on. It's obviously got a Choice Neighborhoods grant. There's part of the community that is, in the 80s, was sort of cordoned off with these metal barriers to kind of keep out drug crime. And so they came to us and said, we want to tear down those barriers, reopen, we want to bring in the best artists in the country to rethink those entry points into this part of our community. And so they ran a pretty amazing process, bringing in some really great artists to look at how to rethink these spaces. This is one of the concept designs here, and they're beginning to implement those now. In Shreveport, Louisiana, there's in a key part of the downtown that's quite underserved at the minute. There's quite a few abandoned buildings. They're looking at building an arts district. One of the key pieces of that was this old firehouse you see there that the Shreveport Arts Council now moved into. So we funded part of the design work for them to move into this new space, and also really a cultural district plan for how to look at how they could activate other parts of the site. They've come back into us and also received money to look at creating a new transportation center and using public art and design to create a really interesting new transportation center. And are also looking at a bunch of other interesting artist-based activities in this community. It's led to a lot of new investment in the area. Our money, I think we've invested around $150,000, and there's been at least $5 million new dollars invested in the area, and a lot of people buying up buildings and renovating them. So, this sort of the idea of this kind of key anchor institution in a neighborhood, using the arts as a lever in a really interesting way. This is a great project. And finally, I just wanted to mention this fantastic project in San Diego. Many of you are probably familiar with the famous Market Creek area of the community and the legendary work the Jacobs Center for Neighborhood Innovation has been doing. They came to us and they said, we've been doing all this very deep, very authentic, equitable community work, but we really haven't stepped back and say, how do we truly, spread the arts through this? They came to us and said, we want to do a planning project. We want to figure out how to deeply involve the arts in all of our planning work. We funded, you can see it online, I just showed a couple pages of it here, a really pretty great arts and design plan for the community going forward. And now they're coming back to us for funding to implement quite a bit of that, quite a few of those projects. I just also wanted to show our website. If you go to our website, you can easily find all the applications. We have sample narratives online. You can read about our town until you're blue in the face. We have tons of information online. That's arts.gov, arts.gov. And if you have any questions about our town, you can feel free to email us at OT, which is short for our town, at arts.gov, and we have staff who will answer those questions all the time. Thanks so much, everybody. We're looking forward to seeing some applications from you guys. Dan, do you want to hand it off to Maria?
Yes, I've introduced my friend and colleague, Maria Jackson. Maria is a member of NEA's National Council on the Arts, which is NEA's kind of governing and advisory body. She's a presidential appointee there. She also has spent years at the Urban Institute really building out the research case around arts and revitalization work. So taking the theory that was once a theory, that artists are kind of central to the work of revitalization and demonstrating the strong evidentiary case for that. And also developing, I think, essentially the kind of the policy frame around a social justice lens through which to view this work. She also is now at the Kresge Foundation, which many of you know is a key funding partner for a lot of the Promise and Choice work and our town work. And so with all those hats, she's really brought, I think, a national perspective to the conversation here and is going to give us a sense of the potential of this work and some of the power that art stakeholders are bringing to revitalization strategy.
Thanks, Dan. Good afternoon, everyone. My remarks are going to draw from about 25 years of work on community revitalization in low-income neighborhoods, and about 20 years of specifically looking at the roles of arts and culture as a dimension of that. And my background isn't originally in the arts, in urban planning. And when I first started doing this work with particular focus on arts and culture, I often found colleagues in planning and community development to be a little bit perplexed by my interest. And I would hear, Maria, your work is on low-income communities, isn't it? Why aren't you doing this? Why are you doing this arts and culture stuff? And my response to that question is that around the world and throughout the ages, strategies to disempower communities have often involved stripping away arts and culture, so stripping away the ability and opportunities of people to authentically and aesthetically express themselves, to make meaning, to ask critical questions, to exercise their imagination and intellect. So if historically art and cultural activity is so important that it has to be removed, curtailed, or controlled to disempower groups, then I would ask why isn't or why aren't strategies that allege to be about empowerment and advancement, why don't they have arts and culture at their core? So my work in the last 20 years or so has been about better understanding how arts and culture are manifest in low-income communities, how such activity does or might contribute to community revitalization, and how we can integrate arts and culture in policies and programs intended to create places where people don't just live, but where they thrive. My time at the Urban Institute in Washington, D.C. Really provided an opportunity for me to lead several multi-year national applied research projects that have allowed me to explore the questions I just listed. And that experience, coupled with personal involvement with artists as well as various kinds of cultural organizations, has led to a set of guiding principles or guiding premises that continue to inform my work in the realms of philanthropy with the Kresge Foundation, public policy with National Endowment for the Arts, and also in my teaching at the graduate level. So I want to share these guiding premises with you, and hopefully it'll spark some conversation and maybe questions or thinking about your own interpretation of arts and culture in the communities where you live and work. One premise is that creativity is a natural impulse and a community asset from which to build. So it's something that everyone has, and while everyone may not aspire to be a professional artist or take that path as a career, in fact, there is a human instinct to want to invent, to tell a story, to be creative, to create solutions. And often when we think about asset-based community development, sometimes the role of arts and culture isn't quite on the radar as about community assets. It's really important to expand thinking about assets to include cultural activity. Second, cultural self-determination is a crucial dimension of equity, and what I mean by that is that it's an equity issue to have a say and a hand in what your story is, how communities come to tell their history, how they come to express their aspirations, and how they come to create the places that they live in, how those places look and feel, that environment in which they're engaged every day as part of both individual and collective lived experience. The ability to have a hand in that is a crucial equity issue. Cultural participation takes many forms and happens in a wide range of venues. It's not limited to audience participation in formal cultural venues, although those are very important dimensions of how we should think about cultural engagement. A lot of times the default is to think that arts and culture happens only in cultural palaces or cultural spaces that are designated for that purpose, when in fact the research that I did for many years at the Urban Institute pointed to arts and culture happening in a very wide range of settings that include public and private places ranging from clinics and schools to community centers, parks, and that cultural participation isn't limited to only consuming art, but also to making, doing, teaching, actively engaging, and putting forward ideas, aesthetic expressions, in addition to what we typically think about, which is more of a consumptive relationship to art. That is, you buy it or you go to witness it. Again, very important dimensions of participation, but certainly not the only ones that should be on our radar. Another premise is that art process can be as important or even more important than art product at some point. So when you think about arts and culture, often people think of, oh, it's a painting or it's a play. And while those certainly are manifestations of arts and culture, what often isn't on the radar is the process by which those products are created. And as we look around many of the examples that have already been mentioned, there's evidence of not only the end product being important, but the actual creative process, especially when it includes engaging residents and regular people in that creativity. That, too, is something that warrants attention, resources, and planning. Artists have many kinds of relationships with the public and roles within communities. So in addition to being the makers of things to buy or experience, there's lots of evidence of artists actually helping people take responsibility for their own creativity and participating in communities as leaders, conceptualizing programs, or helping people tell the narrative or tell the story of their particular place. Certainly in the example that's come up a few times already in Apalaka, there is an example where artists were brought in early on in that process to help in the conceptualization of what the issues to be addressed would even be. So getting beyond thinking about arts as only ornamental or something that happens at the end of a process is a really important, it's an important thing to do as we expand and push the envelope on what it is that it means to have a healthy community and what strategies to create healthy communities look like. The role of artists in re-engaging them at the beginning, not just at the end, becomes crucially important. Opportunities for cultural participation rely on multiple stakeholders, and I think one of the slides that Jason Schupak showed point to that. So certainly in the Our Town program, the range of partners that are involved in very interesting projects that both stimulate active engagement and lead to physical improvements and other kinds of benefits don't only happen with the arts sector alone, but with the collaboration across sectors with health, with education, with housing, with environment, with transportation, and we're beginning to see more and more kinds of collaborations that are worth exploring.
And Maria, I don't want to be rude, but I just want to make sure I'm mindful of the time.
Sure. So just very quickly. So while arts and cultural activity is intrinsically important, it's also relevant for other community concerns and dynamics. And here I've listed some of the kinds of things that my research and the research of others begins to point to. So civic participation, social capital, improvements in the built environment, stewardship of place, preservation of cultural heritage, creation or affirmation of new group identities, bridging boundaries of difference, education outcomes, health outcomes, and economic development. There's been a lot of focus on economic development, but these other outcomes are also crucially important to pay attention to. And last, the current policy environment provides an opportunity for cross-sectoral connections and opportunities for integration, and this webinar is an example of that. So I encourage you to seize the moment and explore the possibilities for you. Thank you. And at this point, I'd like to introduce Bert Krenke. Bert is the founder and artistic director at AS220, a nonprofit center for the arts in Providence, Rhode Island. AS220 has been a crucial catalyst in the revitalization of downtown Providence. And in addition to being an artist, Bert has been on the school board, the Downtown Improvement District, and both of these were positions that were mayoral appointments. And he's also served on the Mayor's Arts and Culture and Tourism Advisory Board and the current Mayor's Transition Team. Bert?
Thank you, Maria. Always inspiring. I apologize for the frenetic nature of this presentation, given that I was asked to do an hour-and-a-half presentation in 10 minutes. I would like to just read to you quickly AS220's vision statement, which I do not have a slide of. AS220 envisions a just world where all people can realize their full creative potential. David, I got to get to the next slide. Okay, here we are. These are 3 buildings that we owned and redeveloped in the downtown. The top left picture is an indication, if you look behind it, of what the downtown looked like. In 1985, when AS220 originally started in another building, the downtown was completely abandoned. AS220 started with $800 in one of those abandoned buildings that had no heat or electricity, started programming independent of licensings or permits or anything. The emphasis being on creating a place where, as Maria was putting it, where the emphasis was on art process and the intrinsic value of what artists and what art process brings, independent, not emphasizing the product as a commodity or the artist as a commodity. So we started with $800. We are now a $4 million a year organization with 60 employees. I also want to clarify something else. I know that the grantees that are attending this webinar are mostly neighborhood-based, and we are in the downtown. I would like to just to give you some contextual sense of this. The downtown truly was abandoned. The downtown was reimagined as a community, a living community, and that's what it has become. And AS220 has been a catalyst for that, reimagining the downtown in that way. And for those of you that don't know Providence, you should also realize that the downtown sort of bleeds pretty seamlessly into the neighborhoods. So AS220 really acts as a cultural hub for not just the Providence neighborhoods, but for the entire state of Rhode Island. This is what those buildings look like now. They represent $25 million of investment in the downtown in completely derelict buildings, and there's been multiples of that $25 million invested all around us. This is our mission statement. I'll give you just a second to glance at that quickly. I would like to emphasize the place where it says, our facilities and services are made available to all artists who need a place to exhibit, perform, or create their original artwork, especially those that cannot obtain space to exhibit or perform from traditional sources because of financial or other limitations. And this is what we do. So we have an unjuried, uncensored mission, which means that any Rhode Island artist in any medium doing original material, gets an opportunity somehow or another to access our facilities and resources, and we still do that. That's where we started. That's where we are. All of our activities are all ages all the time. We have an equal pay policy. All of the staff of the nonprofit, I should also mention that we're a hybrid in the sense that we are a 501c3 with 7 for-profit corporations under our umbrella. No time to explain. The equal pay policy, I think, has engendered a tremendous amount of trust in the institution with the community, and the community feels a phenomenal sense of ownership in who we are. Public programming in any given month, we have anywhere between 100 and 150 opportunities for people to participate in programming, whether that be classes, our performance-based galleries, black box, dance theater, any number of opportunities, up to about 150 sort of access points in any given month. Live Work Studios, we have 48 live studios, the vast majority of which are affordable, and a number of work studios. There are 3 styles of living. There's a communal floor, which goes back to where we started, and then there are smaller and then larger loft apartments. What this really speaks to, as we move down the list, is truly mixed-use, mixed-income development. We all know, all of us who are working in the field understand the strength of that kind of thinking and that kind of development. So going down the list, our industries. We have a fabrication laboratory, a print shop, and a media lab. Our fabrication laboratory has the trendy 3D printers, CNC routers, vinyl cutters, and stuff. We make classes and access to those tools extremely affordable. We have come to realize that providing access not just to education, but also to tools that you build community. There are machines where there are whole communities built around them within our organization, sharing knowledge about how to get certain things accomplished with that equipment. Our youth program, which won a national award last year, works predominantly with kids in the care of the Department of Children, Youth, and Families. We work inside the juvenile prison and outside the juvenile prison. We teach in all arts disciplines, and many of them require some technical capacity, and really, really proud of our program. Food and drink. We have our own restaurant and bar. We realize that food and drink is probably the lowest barrier access point to ASU 20, and then, of course, through that facility, we cross-market a lot of our other events. And we also work with, in one of the first farm to table, where we work with over 40 local farmers. Our menu changes 5 times a year, and we keep it extremely affordable. So you can get a swordfish dinner for $11 at ASU 20. Makes the break-even point very challenging, if you will. And then we have our own bar, but we don't open that until 5 o'clock. It's about it being complementary to other programs, and the food and drink is juxtaposed to our black box theater and our performance space. Commercial tenants, all local businesses that we've helped to raise their profile and their bottom line. A gay bar, a sports bar, a Mexican restaurant, a locksmith, and a barbershop, and then other nonprofit tenants, one of which we nurtured through fiscal agencies, which is a first-generation college access program called College Visions, which is beginning to gain its own national attention, the Rhode Island Council on the Humanities, and on and on. So this is some images of some of the typical, so up in the top left is something in our performance space. The bottom left is our annual fest, which is a real community event where we shut down the streets and have over 20 local acts participating, various diverse food vendors and visual artists. Yep, I'm done.
Yeah.
And the bottom right corner is the cafe.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Bert, for all that great information. As I mentioned earlier in the webinar, we're going to make sure that all this material and a way to contact Bert and his staff are circulated to all the participants after the webinar. In the interim, please go ahead and continue to submit your questions through the Q&A function. Earlier in the webinar, we were having some technical difficulties and could not get Elson Nash from the Department of Education. Was not able to present. So I'm going to take a brief moment before we get into the Q&A and go ahead and give Elson the opportunity to talk about promise and how the arts relates to profit. Elson?
Wow, thank you. I just want to appreciate everything and appreciate my colleagues, particularly Mindy and Dan and Maria, for their presentations, and Bert, fantastic work that you all are doing. It does mix in well with the work of Promise Neighborhoods, which, if you think about the physical development that many of our cousins at the Choice program are doing, we provide some of the education enrichment from cradle to career. Moving on to the next one. And so with the Promise Neighborhoods theory of action, as you see, we talk about resource leveraging, and the box there that's highlighted talks about leveraging other programs. And in this case, we leverage our HUD, justice, labor, and state and local funding as well. We do that in a way to help build the continuum of solutions from early learning through college and career. So many of the things that Bert talked about, like the College Access Program, those are the types of programs that we do with Promise, but we do it in a way that blends from early learning all the way through college and career. We had a competitive preference that focused on the arts and humanities, and these are the 7 implementation grantees that had them, and the types of things that they're doing with out-of-school time, family engagement, and school and curriculum. And so you see the breadth of the programs from rural Berea, Kentucky, Chula Vista, which is essentially in San Diego, Hayward, California, Indianola, which is in Mississippi, our colleagues from LA, YPI, and we have some of those folks on the line, Lubbock, Texas, and also Minneapolis. And so one example is our colleagues there in Berea, Kentucky. I selected this one because we embrace both rural and urban settings. And in this case, they have artists in residence that work in the schools. You see a young lady there playing, I believe that's a ukulele. And in this case, it really is tailored to the Appalachian culture. The artists in residence, as you see the gentleman looking at the picture there, the artists in residence help to develop some of the programming in schools and out of schools with families and with children. And it really is a wonderful opportunity to highlight the cultures, similar in the way in which our colleagues are doing in our sister programs like Choice and NEA. And so with that, James, I just want to thank you for working with me on getting this back up and running, and thank you as the participants for your patience.
Thank you, Elson. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and move to the question and answer portion of the webinar. The first question that's coming is for Mindy and Dan. Mindy and or Dan, are there examples of arts organizations or housing organizations that are working well together that you can share? What lessons from their collaboration should participants apply? I'll go ahead and start with you, Dan.
Yeah, Jason has some thoughts. He's gonna chime in.
Sure. Yeah, there's lots of examples of those happening right now in our town project. There's a great one just to give a slightly kind of example. The Housing Authority in Wyoming has actually been working pretty closely with a bunch of different museums on trying to bring more public art into the sites of culture and sites doing. So that's an interesting one to look into, and we can hook you up with those guys. Also, just in sort of general big kind of housing planning projects, like some of the Choice Neighborhoods projects in Spartanburg, South Carolina. There's a major CDC and Choice artists in their actual planning of the future of the site, using them as a key constituent, and we can certainly scale with those folks too. So a lot of those projects end up being, the housing authorities either end up being actual art towards sites themselves, or end up looking at how do they either support the artists that are in residence, support their careers, or end up being how do you involve artists in the kind of planning and visioning for the future of the community. There's good examples of all those kinds of things. I think the challenge, just to wrap up, is we speak different languages. Artists don't always speak the same language as folks and vice versa. So, it's really helpful when you have this kind of language translators, like your local art council, or maybe somebody else who's familiar with both sides of the coin, to be part of this conversation and manage them better.
And this is Mindy from. There are a number of developers that we're aware of that, for example, will do live workspace, and that qualifies somehow for some subsidies, sometimes tax credits. Another thing is in historic renovations, where you often can't figure out what to do with the first floor. A number of developers I'm aware of have made the first ground level very low rent commercial space that is artist live workspace or artist space, because very often people won't live on the first floor, and you can't in some cases find a commercial tenant depending on the neighborhood. So it's a way to get more street art, and the windows are open. People can see the artist doing the work, which actually helps a lot. Another is to partner with youth organizations that do arts, and then to honestly decorate the development's hallways with all of the work the kids did, very often about their own experience of living in the community prior to the redevelopment, as part of the redevelopment, or their own acknowledgement of the history of the community. And it really creates a sense of pride for a lot of the kids. So there are some developers who do this work. It just requires being a little more thoughtful about it.
And this is Dan. Just to get the last word in here, as PHAs really transform themselves to having stewardship over not just the housing stock, but the broader neighborhoods in which they're serving, what Seattle has managed to do, I think, is also an exemplar of good work here. Where they've really brought in not just artists to help think about the physical space, but really understanding that arts are kind of a core to the regional identity and the sense of place in Seattle, and not just in economic terms, but in social capital terms, and have really done interesting work on multiple levels around engaging artists and art stakeholders in their revitalization.
Yeah, if I were to make a recommendation to any of the planning or grantees, or any of the grantees, really, is to try to find a nonprofit arts organization in your community, because chances are they will have some experience with doing some of this kind of work, and begin to bring them into your planning processes or even your design processes.
Thank you, Mindy. The next question is a good follow-up to that one. What are your, and I'll relate this to the entire, all the panelists, what are your experiences in terms of developing cultural arts districts and generally using art as a catalyst for community development without displacing low-income residents? Displacement seems to be a difficult problem. And are there any lessons you've learned from the field?
Sure, I'll jump in here. This is Jason. Gentrification is obviously a huge issue that I believe is not just tied cultural activity, but many other economic activities that happen in communities. There's larger forces at work many times. That said, we are very careful to try to only fund projects that are deeply engaging the community and its vision for its future and the way that the arts fit into that picture. I think there's lots of examples of where that's been done carefully and well, and I think it works because of what's happened in Providence around some of those issues. Wants to jump in. If you're specifically asking about cultural districts, there is a person at Americans for the Arts named Teresa Cameron, who is collecting. We've given her money to kind of create a central resource on how to do cultural districts, and so if you give her a ring, she could give you kind of some of the basics of what they've begun to collect and what some of the tools are out there that are sensitive. Bert, do you want to jump in on this one?
In Providence, in the state of Rhode Island, is an interesting story. It started in the downtown when there was nobody here, which obviously had its sort of objective. But then other communities throughout the state of Rhode Island went to the legislature, and part of that district provided. Excuse me.
Oh, okay. Were you in that?
Wait, there's a lot of noise on the thing. I'm not sure. Part of what that district did is it provided tax incentives by liberating artists and galleries from any state income tax. Now, other communities decided that this was a good strategy for developing their downtowns into smaller communities. They passed legislation to enable them communities to do the same, and now we passed a state law where the entire state artists are exempt from state tax, state income tax, sales tax, and so are the galleries. So it really has spread to provide certain kinds of tax incentives and tools for all communities throughout the state to be able to enable artists and the arts community to help affect change.
This is Dan Lurie at NEA. I wanted to add on that I think fundamental to that question and the process that we see playing out here is that what we're really talking about is managing neighborhood change and how is there a sense of agency among the neighborhood stakeholders so that as communities change, as they will, how can they have a sense of agency and ownership over how that changes and what the outcomes are. And artists, as Jason mentioned, artists are obviously central to that, both in the power of the work they bring and in their place in these communities. So we tend to come at that question from a positive perspective, which is artists can play a transformative role, less from a real estate developer's perspective, which is how can we inject outside art stakeholders into a community so that we can see, for example, real estate price changes. That is not our objective. It's not the perspective we at the federal government bring. Obviously, there are many instances where we've all heard of that being the case, but in terms of our programmatic goals and our policy objectives, it very much is about creating that process over time, as opposed to a short-term fix to community challenges.
Yeah, and let's remind everyone that if you are a choice grantee, you are talking about a large number of permanently affordable housing, and that is usually leveraging tax credits, which are another chunk of permanently or at least for 30-year affordable housing. So that it's really in the choice neighborhoods where you have the greatest opportunity to integrate the arts and not have displacement, because the units that are going to be built back on in the neighborhood will be long-term affordable, 40 years and 30 years. So it's a really great opportunity to make these particular neighborhoods cultural centers.
Yeah, and Bert, in defense of artists, I'd like to make the case that it isn't artists that gentrify neighborhoods, it's private developers that gentrify neighborhoods.
This is Maria. I would just want to add that when you have a neighborhood that has a strong cultural identity, and I don't mean necessarily or only ethnic specific or what have you, but when you have a place that is palpable and has its own style, its own flavor, if you will, and that is something that is prized and validated, it becomes more difficult to try to erase that. So I think that there's a lot to be said for raising up the value of authentic local culture as we think about how to manage change.
Thank you, Maria. And now we have about a minute left, and I wanted to give Dan the opportunity to give some closing or summary remarks to close the webinar.
Thanks, James. This is Dan Lurie from NEA. So you have all heard, I think, of a pretty wide-ranging conversation to give you a flavor of the possibilities of linking Our Town, Promise Neighborhoods, and Choice Neighborhoods grant programs. I want to thank you all for your interest. I speak on behalf of the entire institution at NEA in saying that we are excited to be a part of this conversation, and we know that our stakeholders on the ground in your communities, whether they're our town grantees or not, very much look forward to these kind of conversations. So we at NEA will do our part to really host and foster this kind of dialogue going forward. I believe, James, that you're going to put all of our contact information up or distributed for folks who have particular questions. But we welcome the follow-up. Very much want this to be the beginning of a series of conversations. And please let this know that this goes deep within each of our agencies. Our leadership, political leadership, and policy leadership very much cares about these connections being drawn even more so going forward. So I want to thank you all for your interest and time and look forward to working with you in some capacity going forward.
Thank you, Dan. And with that, I will close the webinar and encourage all of you to complete the participant satisfaction survey. Thank you and have a good afternoon.
Thanks for using WebEx. Please visit our website at www.webex.com.